All right. So thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon on one of our annual updates to our IA stakeholders. We have a few important items to give you an update on this afternoon. As you see here on the agenda, we have Peter Scully here with us, Deputy County Executive, and then to give us an update, and then we'll continue on with all things related to IAs from the Health Department. So, and always remember, this is a meeting that we invite you to, speak up to, and always, give us your input. And we're always inviting more feedback after the meeting.
Thanks,
And
Julia.
lastly, we do have training credits available for liquid waste license holders who attend today's meeting. After the meeting, please email septicdemo@suffolkcountynewyork.gov with your name, company name, and liquid waste license number. All right. And as usual, if you have additional questions, comments, or concerns that you're not able to get through to us today, please contact us at the respective phone numbers and email addresses shown here on the slide.
Thanks, Julia. Thanks everybody for taking the time to jump on. This is Peter Scully speaking to you for the County Executive's Office. We do like to check in periodically with the industry, both to inform you about developments on our end from a policy standpoint, and then importantly to get feedback from the industry about how things are going, issues of concern to you, and things that you think we can improve. We're always looking to improve the program. I am, however, very proud of the staff, Walter Widiak and John Sanjan, and Ziegel, Julia, Jen Freed, Craig Nepper is with us also, Jonathan Pye. I think that they're doing a great job under very, very challenging circumstances. I'll give you a little bit of update on where we are on the wastewater management district. Next slide. So we have been working for 2 years along with stakeholders to advance the establishment of a county-wide district and the creation of a water infrastructure fund to help create the organizational structure and the source of funding that we need to advance the watersheds wastewater plan, which many of you are familiar with, which Ken will go over today. Last year, you may be aware that the governor included language in her budget which would have authorized the county to advance a ballot measure last year in 2022, asking voters to approve the establishment of the countywide district and what we call a stable and recurring revenue stream, such that we have guaranteed source of funding each and every year for wastewater infrastructure. The proposal would have generated about $41 million a year, 75% of which would be required under the state authorizing legislation to be invested in IA technology, which is good news for the industry. Last year, however, the state legislature did not advance what is called the Suffolk County Water Quality Restoration Act, and so we had no ballot measure last year. We've been busy over the past 6 months working with organized labor, the building trades, and the environmental community to advance a proposal to the ballot in 2023. This slide is a cover slide of a presentation that we've been making to community organizations over the past few weeks, urging the state government to authorize the ballot measure. Next slide. The next few slides show the information that we're presenting to the public. Many of you have seen these before, but these are Newsday articles that date back to the 1960s, reflecting the warnings that were being made at the time about the need for sewer technology throughout Suffolk County, that cesspools over the long term were not a sustainable long-term disposal option. And as we all know, for a variety of reasons, unfortunately, a long-term plan for wastewater infrastructure throughout Suffolk County had never been advanced until 2020, when the subwatersheds wastewater plan findings resolution was approved by the Suffolk County Legislature. We now have a long-term wastewater infrastructure plan. We're in the process now of moving into implementation of phase 2. Next slide. So this is the slide we use to explain to folks why continued reliance on cesspools and septic systems is considered not a sustainable practice. This slide was provided to us by the Nature Conservancy. We like it because it's in motion, but the fact is that cesspools and septic systems are not designed to treat wastewater, but simply to channel it into the environment. They're a great engineering solution, but they're not a good environmental solution. And they're the reason that excess nutrients are fouling our bays and harbors. Next slide. So we've been using slides like this to just educate folks who are not as familiar with the science, making clear that there's a link between continued dependence on cesspools and septic systems and water quality in the community, and the importance of having a science-based plan, and that scientific studies have determined that wastewater impacts from cesspools and septic systems makes up about 70% of the nitrogen that finds its ways into our bays and harbors. That's kind of a consistent figure across multiple studies. Next slide. Again, in addition to the environmental impacts, we emphasize the implications for the economy in Suffolk County, which being surrounded by water relies in significant part on the the cleanliness of the water for economic purposes. We have a very robust tourism economy. There is a lot of beach-related activity, as you see here. There's a recreational boating industry that provides $500 million a year in expenditures. Just a whole lot of what we do out here depends on usable water. And in recent years, the trend towards discolored water in our bays and harbors, harmful algal blooms, beach closures, and fish kills, over the long term would have a very significant negative impact on the environment, on the economy in the region. Next slide. So we've been talking in very general terms to the public at this point about what the outcome of our subwatersheds wastewater plan, which we're calling a clean water plan, would be. It really is intended to replace hundreds of thousands of cesspools and septic systems over the next few decades by creating a dedicated fund to make it affordable for homeowners to replace the systems. We can talk a little bit about the policy decisions that might be made to ramp up our IA program to the point where we're replacing, more than 1,000, perhaps as many as 5,000 or 6,000 systems a year, which is our goal. The important thing is that the fund that we're creating would provide a match for us to seek more federal and state funding to update water infrastructure, both IAs and sewers and community sewer stations. Next slide. How your community will benefit, and if we're in a community where there are specific needs and there's a specific interest, we always make a presentation about a project that might be pending in their community, but we want to make clear that there are multiple benefits to what we're proposing to do here with this long-term plan to swap out cesspools and septic systems, either by connecting parcels to sewer or by replacing cesspools and septics with IAs. There are multiple benefits, both in terms of economic activity, and we'll talk a little bit about this industry later, protection of drinking water over the long term, increasing property values, and providing sewers to areas where we want to revitalize our downtowns is something that's a real goal. It resonates with people, and then obviously protecting and restoring water quality in our bays and harbors, which seems to resonate with everyone. Next slide. This is an editorial that Newsday published right after the county issued the subwatersheds wastewater plan in 2019. I mean, it reflects a recognition by the Newsday editorial board that the plan is great, but the plan can't really be implemented unless we have a source of funding to make the improvements. And that's a point that we'll continue to press this spring and this summer, and if we're successful in getting a ballot measure put up in the fall with the public as we approach the vote on the ballot measure in November. November, and we especially like this excerpt, pressing state lawmakers to give us the authority we need to move forward or offer us an alternative. We think this is the year when we'll force the question, and we're optimistic about having a ballot measure this November. Next slide. So again, reiterating to folks before we close our presentation that we're proposing to create a recurring and secure revenue stream. That the purpose of it is to make it affordable for us to upgrade technology, either by connecting people to sewers or upgrading their system to an IA system without them footing the bill, or the entire bill at least, and that's necessary really for environmental purposes. Next slide. One of the things that we know the public is always concerned about is whether, if they vote in favor of a funding source, whether the government will divert that funding for another purpose. It's a fact that government has in the past done that. And so the state authorizing legislation that we've crafted makes it impossible for the county to divert funding, creates what's essentially a lockbox requiring that the funds be used for and only for wastewater infrastructure, i.e. the sewer improvements that are consistent with the subwatershed wastewater plan. We built into the legislation both a board of trustees to oversee use of the fund that includes representatives of local government, some of the environmental communities, the IA industry, and also an advisory committee to allow some of the non-governmental organizations to have some input into use of the fund, make it a transparent process that people can have some confidence in. And state legislation also would require annual independent audits of the fund and an annual report and public review of the audits, trying to provide some level of confidence there. Next slide. So we have had strong local support, both for investments in water quality and for our plan. The coalition that has been pressing the government to act includes organized labor, the building trades, business leaders, and environmentalists. We're proud of that. And we know that people in Suffolk County, when asked whether or not to invest in water quality at the polls, have consistently voted in favor of doing that. And we're confident that if we're able to put up a ballot measure this year, they'll be supportive as well. Next slide. And so what's next? We're working now with our colleagues in state government. The governor has included Water Quality Restoration Act in her budget. The language that she's included is not exactly what we were looking for. It's not complete. So we're working now with her office and state legislators to see if we can't make some modifications to the language that was included to make sure that it meets all of the needs that we have to implement the subwatersheds wastewater plan. It's important that happen this year. Subwatersheds wastewater plan is broken into several phases. We are in phase 1 now that really relies on both our grant program for IAs and the significant amount of grant funding we obtained for sewers to keep our programs moving. But 2024 marks the start of phase 2 of the subwatersheds wastewater plan, and the subwatersheds wastewater plan assumes that both the funding source and the countywide district will be in place in time for us to begin phase 2. So this is the year for action. We're looking forward to advancing the process in the weeks and months ahead. We'll look forward to working with people from the industry, because we think you guys have a real stake in making sure that the plan moves forward. You'll see from the discussion that we're going to have today that one of the things we're concerned about, and we're being asked about by elected officials, is whether or not we feel confident that we have an industry out here that's capable of installing 6,000 systems a year, designing and installing 6,000 systems a year. And so we're going to give people, an opportunity to let us know what they think. And we really want to be able to compile some information that we can provide to elected officials to give them a level of comfort that yes, this is a growing industry, and over time it will be ramping up and will be capable of making that that number of installations in a given year. The staff did a great job in the subwatersheds wastewater plan using certain assumptions about the number of properties that are sold a year, the number of systems that fail a year, about trying to project how many systems would be replaced year by year over a 30-year period. And, we need to make sure we truth test those assumptions and see whether or not we think the industry is going to be capable of the ramp up. I think that's my last slide, Julia. So I'll turn it back over to the staff unless anybody has any questions for me on policy issues. If not, thanks everybody for jumping on, and look forward to a productive afternoon. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Peter. This is Ken Ziegel with the Suffolk County Department of Health, for those who don't know me. So yeah, as Peter mentioned, one of our primary objectives today for this agenda is to roll out some updated industry capacity projections that we've done here at the Health Department. Again, have an open discussion. So this is an open forum. Anybody has any questions or comments on some of our assumptions in here, don't be shy. If you are shy to speak up, with this group, you can always email us privately or call us privately. The door is always open. Next slide, Julia. So as Peter mentioned before, we're in phase one of the subwatershed wastewater plan, which calls for what we call program ramp up. A huge part of program ramp up, obviously, is the creation of the industry and building the industry that everybody's done such a great job so far. And we're inching closer and closer to the finish line of phase one, which, as Peter mentioned before, is the end of 2023, moving into 24. So the subwatershed wastewater plan, as Peter mentioned, outlines the installation rate goals that we have. We'll talk about those in a minute. As a refresher, the subwatershed wastewater plan also provided an estimate back in 2017 on industry capacity based on the then current numbers that we had. And they were last reviewed and updated here in 2020 with feedback from manufacturers, installers, maintenance providers, design professionals. So we always thank you for all the input that we get from you. It makes it's critical for what we're doing here. And so the current estimates that I'm going to run through today are a combination of some of the assumptions that were used in 2020 with some new assumptions and new data from 2023. And again, we want to hear from you, and just in the back of your minds, I guess, again, if not comfortable today, there'll be a comment period after this that will that'll be rolling out in a few minutes. But what are some of the limiting factors if we think there's going to be an issue with certain capacity and certain of the aspects of the program, staffing, manufacturing, supply shortages, funding availability, anything and everything that anybody has concerns on. Next slide. So here's a quick refresher for kind of the first 11 years, and actually this goes through the first 30 years, which is phase two, as Peter mentioned before, the subwatershed wastewater plan. This is our primary project phase. It calls for over 170,000 upgrades over that 30-year period. So starting in 2024, we ramp up from about an estimated 1,000 systems per year up to 4,000 installations per year. 3,000 of those would be retrofits of existing systems, and 1,000 would be for new construction. The trigger, the new policy option for phase for 2024 that kicks in, that increases this installation rate, is requiring the installation of IA systems for any failed system in a county. So you can no longer replace a failed system with a conventional system. You would now have to replace that system with an IA system. And in 2024, it focuses on the highest geographic priority areas that are delineated in the plan. At that point in time, we would have roughly 3,000 systems in the ground that are going to require operation and maintenance. 2 years later, the SWP adds an additional recommended policy option, which is requiring IA systems upon property transfer, again, within those highest geographic priority areas. And it bumps up to 6,750 installations per year. And then at that point in time, we would have about 11,000 systems in the ground requiring operation and maintenance. And then fast forward in another 11 years, it increases, the rate of installation increases again, up to estimated over 7,000 installations per year. The policy options requiring upgrades stays the same. What we do is we expand the geographic priority areas that they're required. And then in 2037, just an interesting, calculation that we did at that point in time, there would be 92,000 systems in the ground requiring operation and maintenance. Next slide. So the first group that we looked at was the manufacturing capacity of the IA systems themselves. So right now we have 6 general use and provisionally approved IA technologies in the county. Based on historical discussions with the manufacturing industry, an average, we've been told that there's an average capacity of about 60 systems per month for each of the systems. So if we do the math, 360 per month would turn into over 4,000 systems per year. So we would be in good shape for rollout of the program of phase 2 in 2024, which is 4,000 systems per year. The next phase of phase 2, 2 years later in 2026, subphase, I should say, it jumps up to 6,000. In our minds here at Suffolk County, we're pretty confident that the industry would be able to ramp up and catch that 6,000 through both additional technologies being approved in the county and just increasing manufacturing based on market demand. But again, we want to know, continue to work with the manufacturers, and we want to know if the 60 per month is still a viable number. Are there any concerns? Is it higher? Is it lower? Is our initial thought here that, being able to ramp up to 6,000 a year in 2026, is that a potential concern? So again, I'll plant the seed now, and again, at any time, anybody is welcome to jump in the chat or raise their hand for a question or comment. And then if not, again, there's going to be a comment period available after this meeting as well. So next slide. So the second facet that we looked at was the installation industry. So we actually have now 147 liquid waste contractors that are licensed to install IA systems in a county. That number keeps growing based on input from several installers. We figured out kind of the average monthly installation capacity is about 5 each. Again, that number could grow based on the size of the company and so forth. That was just an average number that was, I think, determined back in 2020. But if we do that math, even at 5 each times 147 per month, it turns into a capacity of over almost 9,000 IA systems per year, which would actually exceed, be sufficient for the peak demands of the program in 2037. So installation capacity does not seem to be an issue. Again, if there's any concerns on that, any installation industry, any installers, feel free to reach out to us. I'll put it in the chat. I see something in the chat. I'm not sure if it's oh, thank you, Brian. So yeah, so it seems like installation, we're going to be okay. And especially if we make those policy changes where we require no longer, can someone install a conventional system, they have to install an IA system. Well, then those installers are going to install IA systems. So we should have that capacity there. Next slide. So third industry that we looked at was the design industry. We actually went back to our new database, the new Acela platform that was rolled out in the past couple of years, and downloaded how many design professionals have submitted designs for IA systems over the last couple of years, and we actually have 172 individual different design professionals that have provided designs here to the department. So again, if we assume an average of approximately 5 designs per month for each design professional, again, based on old feedback back from 2020, could have even been from 2017. Based on that, there would be capacity for designing 860 IA systems per month, or over 10,000 systems per year, which again would meet our demand and the program's goal. So we don't think that's going to be a concern. Next slide. And then last but not least, I think this might be the first time that we actually took a harder look at the maintenance side of things. And so right now, there are 12 contractors that are licensed and certified to maintain IAs in Suffolk County. For those that aren't familiar with the requirements for maintenance, it's kind of two-step process. One, maintenance providers get a liquid waste endorsement from Consumer Affairs through Suffolk County, and there's 40 organizations that are licensed and eligible to receive, or over 40, probably 52, to receive to do maintenance. But then there's the second step that the manufacturers of the individual IA systems themselves certify contractors. So right now, there are 12 contractors that are both have the license, the county license, as well as the manufacturer certification. Again, this is based on recent input from maintenance providers. They estimate that approximately 21 service visits can be executed per month on average. Again, some more, some less. And then based on this right now, based on the 12 contractors, that would be 252 systems per month, or 3,000 systems per year. If all of the folks that have the county's liquid waste endorsement were to get certified, that would bump up the capacity to over 13,000 IA systems per year. So that's definitely one of the, going through this analysis in 2023, on our end here, one of the things that will be good through at least 2026. At that point, I think we had estimated 10 or 11,000 systems in the ground. So we'd be good till then, but at some point, around 2026, 2027, that demand's just going to continue to increase and increase and increase, and eventually hit the 90,000, 100,000, 177,000. So that's something that we're definitely going to need to see continue growing. It's a great opportunity, obviously, for creating local jobs and the economy. So again, if anybody has any thoughts on that, again, don't hesitate to reach out to us for both the estimated number of service visits per month, or any other concerns or ideas. Next slide. So I'm going to run through this, and I'm going to bounce to the chat, because I see some stuff popping up in the chat. Now, we do not need to answer these questions today, but we wanted to put these questions out there to the industry as possible follow-up questions that you could provide us feedback on. So I bolded the two that could potentially be an issue, and one was the manufacturing. I don't think that it's going to be an issue, but that was one that fell a little bit short of the peak capacity recommended in the subwatersheds wastewater plan. And then the maintenance, as we discussed before. But again, we're always looking for feedback on the typical rates that we're using in terms of how many systems can be designed a month for an individual or firm, and likewise with installations. And if there is a concern on peak capacity, and is there a rate determining step for an individual company? Is there something that Suffolk County can do to assist in streamlining that rate determining step? These are just ideas to, again, spark thoughts and feedback that we can receive. We're asking for feedback on this for March 9th to the septic demo email addresses on here. But again, don't ever be shy to reach out to myself, Julia, Jen by phone. The door is always open. I'm going to take a quick peek at the chat right now, and thank you again, Brian. Hi, Chuck. How is the health department planning to ramp up staff to review 10,320 systems per year? So one of the things that we have talked about internally, which would still have to be figured out at the time, would be, streamlining. It'd be twofold. One would be increasing capacity through hiring, but it would also be, and there is I should mention, in the proposed table, recurring revenue source and last year's draft water quality restoration fund proposal, there was specific discussion in there about the funds being available for use for administration of the program, and that includes bringing more people on for reviews. But we're also looking at other options here at the county, which would include possibly streamlining approvals, similar to, for the folks that are familiar with the SHIP process, something like that, or a hybrid in between is something that we would consider. But definitely on our end, we will figure that out and make it happen. There's definitely multiple options on how to make that happen, but it's a very good question.
Thanks, Ken.
Don't see any other questions in the chat. So I think that's my last slide on this aspect. But again, we want your feedback. So if you're a representative for a company, feel free to take this back. Julia or one of us will email this presentation out to the group afterwards, and we're looking for feedback by March 9th. Thanks again. I think that's it for me, Julia.
Okay, looks like there's just one more chat item.
Thank you. This is a good comment too. Just referring to surveying as being a possible rate limiter as well. That's, that's just a really good question. And I guess my initial reaction is, on our end, I think that's just a really good point. We speak to design professionals. Many of the design professionals work for firms that have surveying capacity also, but many of them don't. So I think on our end, one of the first steps here would actually be for us to start reaching out to surveyors and kind of add that as a fifth category possibly in our review. That's my initial reaction for that. It's a really good question. And then okay, sorry, that's generally the question. So yeah, I think that's a really good point, an excellent question. And I would say on our end, that's something that we will investigate separately. And we have another, Julia, or I guess I'll mention this later on at the conclusion of the presentation, but there'll be another meeting in a few months from now to revisit this and, compile the comments that we've received, share the information, and that could be one of the action items that we, responses that we share as well.
All right. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, everyone, for your input. For right now, we're just going to move on to our next agenda item to keep the meeting going. We have a few more topics to cover. Next up is the Septic Improvement Program, the grant program to fund IA upgrades right now. This program is housed in the Office of Ecology with the Suffolk County Department of Health Services in Yaphank. And our main email address to contact us is septicdemo@suffolkcountiny.gov. So just going to skip over to the current events. Many of the people in this meeting today are pretty familiar with our Suffolk County Septic Improvement Program and the New York State Septic System Replacement Program, also administered here at the Health Department. Some new interesting information here is that the IRS ruling that I have on the next slide in our favor has brought in much new interest into our program. Now that the grants are not considered taxable, we have seen new interest as far as new applications coming in, but also people that have grants already issued to them, you know, fully executed grants that they maybe weren't sure they actually wanted to go ahead with their program and they were asking for extensions, you know, every year. But we've seen those people, you know, come forward and say, okay, now I'm ready to move forward with my program now that I know it's not going to, you know, hit my income. Next up is our website is back up, the reclaimourwater.info website. It does have a little homepage there for the septic improvement program. So I know a lot of you have been saying like, oh, we reference that website a lot. And so, and us too here. So we're really glad to have that back up. The application for the septic improvement program right now is still with the electronic like PDF application that is available on that website or by emailing us. Homeowners can fill that application out and email it to us or mail it to us or drop it off while we work to recover the public-facing online application portal. But also on that note, we are in the beginning stages of transitioning the SIP online application to that Acela platform that many of you have been hearing about in regard to office wastewater management permit applications. That will be coming in 2023. And many of our SIP approved installers know about this swap out from our handy dandy Google Sheets. Now they're called Excel 365 sheets. And if you are an approved vendor or want to be an approved vendor and don't know what that means, please reach out to me. And then we continue to reach out to our existing grant awardees. You know, there are this realm of people out there that have grants in place, money is allocated to them. And, you know, we reach out to them, let them know about the upcoming expiration date of their grant. Are they still planning on moving forward? Did they need an extension? You know, did you move? Are you still out there? And, you know, that gets projects either going or we find out that they actually aren't moving forward with their project anymore. And I would like to, you know, let you guys know or ask you if you know of people that said to you, oh, no, I'm not going to move forward anymore with this grant or anything like that. Or if they have any concerns or questions, please let us know so that we could reach out to them and make sure everyone's on the same page about that grant. Because like I said, we have, you know, the grant is already there. All the hard work is done. The money is already allocated to them. So in that regard, I just wanted to send out a big thank you to all of our SIP staff here, as well as the Office of Wastewater Management folks that are always helping us get each one of these projects going, you know, get them in the ground, get these cesspools and septic systems replaced and upgraded with IAs, which is obviously all of our goal here. And so just a little bit more information about that IRS ruling. This is certainly great news for clean water here in Suffolk County. As per the December 2nd, 2022 IRS ruling, payments made by Suffolk County under the Septic Improvement Program are not to be concluded in the grant awardee's gross income. Any grant awardee who may have already reported the grants as income, as if they previously received a 1099, they may file an amended return with the Form 1040X. We have a link to all of this information on the reclaimerwater.info website. We have heard from many grant awardees that they've already filed a return and, you know, are getting money back. You know, really good news for people that participated in our program and the future of our program. A notification by email was sent out about this ruling to all grant awardees in the past. So if there is anyone out there that's, you know, maybe confused or didn't hear about it, we would obviously want to get that information out to them, but they should all have had it. And just want to point out anyone that is involved with getting these grant packages, if you see any of them, we have replaced the W-9 that was in those packages with just a mailing address certification form, so that it's part of our audit, so that it's make sure no duplication of payments is done. So you'll see that new form in there going out. And just a brief update on where we are with this program, as we like to make sure everyone's on the same page as us here. We have applications coming in at an increased rate, as I had mentioned, and I'd just like to show where we've been and where we're going as far as new applications coming in year after year after year. Obviously, that continues to grow, and we also just take a look at it by average applications coming in by month, and we're already starting to see that blip up since that December IRS ruling of on average we saw more in January than previous months of monthly averages in the years before. Our grand total amount of applications received right now through the life of our program is 3,787. Those are people that want to replace their existing cesspools and septic tanks with IAs. That's great interest. And we do see the majority of people that come in and are issued grants are people that have, failing cesspools, blocked cesspools, systems that are what we call non-catastrophic failures. They're getting pumped year after year. There's wastewater backing up or on the ground surface. In addition to our catastrophic failures that come in, and we get those addressed, as well as non-failures. But we're definitely getting caught up on that. As far as grant issuance, we have our county SIP grant. To date, we have 2,061 county SIP grants issued, and just taking a look at all of those grants that have been issued to date, the vast majority of them have been paid out. And there is this, that's 56% shown there. And then there's this, chunk, 17% that people that had a grant, but then declined it. Maybe that's because of the taxability of the grant, and maybe those people are going to come back to us. So, but then of course we also have our active grant awardees. 27% of that amount are people that currently have a grant in their name right now that haven't installed their system yet. So there's certainly people out there in addition to all the additional grants to be issued. Very similar situation on the New York State SSRP grant side, because again, these are two different grants. Majority of people do get both grants and apply for both grants, but two grants issued, and majority of them paid out. But we have this vast amount, 34% of people that have active New York State SSRP grants issued to them. As far as IAs that have been installed with grant funding, we have our chart here of the amounts installed per month in blue bars since 2017 through 2022, and the overall cumulative amount of grant funded installations in this orange bar coming up here. Right now we're at 1,384 systems that have been paid out with grant funds, and so there is more to be added to these amounts as invoices come in. Sometimes invoices are delayed for one reason or another, and on average we we had a pretty high average amount per month for the year of 2022, and we're looking to increase that for 2023 with your assistance. And then on the grant fund side, to date, Suffolk County has invested over $26 million into the SIP program. Of that, $13.4 million has been paid out already to approved vendors. And of that, over $21.6 million has been allocated to the grant awardees. So both paid out and still active. At this time, the remaining SIP funds that are unallocated will enable the issuance of another 300 grants through Q3 of 2023. And we're currently requesting an additional $3 million to be added to the Suffolk County SIP fund, which would push us through at least the end of 2023. Hoping, that bridges us to the recurring revenue stream that we spoke about earlier today. In 2022 alone, Suffolk County paid out over $3.6 million in county SIP grant funds to approved vendors. And on the New York State SSRP side, additional is a different batch of funds. New York State has invested over $40 million in Suffolk County's SSRP grant funds. That includes that additional $20 million that was announced by Governor Hochul in 2022. That represented the third round from a 5-round $75 million fund. And that's a statewide fund. And so far, Suffolk County has been allocated $40 million of that $75 million statewide fund. So obviously the lion's share of that program is getting directed to Suffolk County because they recognize the need here and the demand. Of our New York State funding, $13.2 million has been paid out to date, with over 19.7 allocated to grant awardees. At this time, there is enough SSRP funds to enable the issuance of another 2,000 grants, which is likely another year or two left in that funding. In 2022 alone, Suffolk County paid out over $3.4 million in New York State funds. And just throwing up this little reminder out there for in case anyone is not as familiar what these grants are. On the individual scale, homeowners are granted $10,000 base grant for the Suffolk County SIP grant, with additional $5,000 available if the design calls for a pressurized shallow drain field, and additional $5,000 available for the installation if the homeowner qualifies as low to moderate income. And in addition, there's that sister grant that I mentioned, New York State Septic System Replacement Program, an additional up to $10,000. We also partner with CDCLI for a low interest loan program, and there's additional funding through the town CPF funds in Southampton, East Hampton, and Shelter Island. This grant funding enables Suffolk County to implement the upgrades in accordance with the timeline in the phase 1 of the subwatersheds wastewater plan, prior to the establishment of a countywide wastewater management district and recurring revenue stream. And lastly, or just a reminder to our current approved vendors and information to anyone that's looking to become a vendor in our septic improvement program, the requirements that we need to in order to issue those grant funds to these contractors. And before I pass the baton over, I just wanted to see if there's any questions or comments on the status of this septic improvement program, which I see there are over on my other screen here in the chat. Let's see. Do we need a wet signature on the applications? At this time, we do not need a wet signature on the SIP application that is sent, and that is because we will receive this wet signature upon grant issuance. There's a application certification part of that grant contract. Does New York State allow for the exclusion as well? New York State Septic System Replacement Program application. We prefer that one comes in as a wet signature at this time, just because we don't have our online application for that.
No, that was for the income exclusion.
Oh, no. New York State SSRP is a flat up to $10,000 grant.
Julia, I think the question is.
IRS ruling. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, Suffolk County will not be issuing 1099s on the grants issued by Suffolk County here, which is both the county SIP and the state SSRP.
Right, but we still kind of recommend those homeowners just touch base with their tax consultants as well, right? Like that's our understanding, but. And you're right, Julia, and they're not issuing 1099s, but.
Correct. You're right. Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so similarly, Meg, so there's no amended 1099s being issued. It's just the directions that are on that IRS ruling that are exactly what the homeowner would need to do.
Yeah, I get that question. Like the 1040X is, I guess, doesn't necessarily cover your New York state tax. So the question homeowners keep asking me is there a form specific for New York state that I can do to amend my New York state income tax?
Hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, I don't have the answer to that right now. All I have is that IRS ruling.
Okay.
You know, we can try to determine and get back to you.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Let's see, any update on new construction grant program?
I can take that one, Julia. I'm assuming, Sean, I'm assuming that's the IA GAP program. So that program, I don't know if you recall, but the appropriating legislation, basically the law that created the program set it up as a 1-year program from, I think the effective date was to essentially, it was signed by the county executive in November, at the end of November of 2021. So, and then basically the program itself, the law said it was a 1-year program effective from that date. So technically it expired at the end of November. We put a resolution through. We had about 8 grant applicants that already had everything complete. But we weren't able to complete the grant agreements because of the cyber intrusion. So there was legislation that went in extending the program end dates. However, the legislation did not allow new applicants. It was basically, the intent of it was to finalize the applications that were complete. So I don't know if that answers your question, Sean, but that's kind of the current status of the grant program. Technically, it's closed to new applicants now.
Thanks, Ken. When all systems must be IA mandated, what will you do with low-lying systems? The next question.
We are accepting proposals for if there's IA systems that can provide low-line systems that are still being able to be maintained and can meet all of the requirements. So if you have a IA system that is able to do that by use of extension collars, it can still be maintained without any confined space entry. You can submit those proposals to us and we'll be looking to implement those. Otherwise, pumps, to pump up waste as opposed to going to low line systems will be the answer.
Okay. A previous slide said in 2026, Suffolk County will mandate septic upgrades to systems located in high priority zones for land transfers. And this was your SWP projections slide.
Definitely. Yep. And that, so it's somewhat of a correct statement. The SWP recommends that in 2026 that IAs be required or mandated for systems in those high priority areas for land transfers. So the answer is yes, with the caveat that that's obviously subject to approval from the policymakers that actually have to sign off on the law, so to speak, to create that mandate.
Okay, keep the comments coming in. At this time, I'm gonna switch to the next topic. Jennifer.
Yeah, my name is Jennifer Fries. I'm with the Health Department. I'm just going to give a quick update on how our IAs are performing in Suffolk County, approvals of IAs and management updates. Next slide. So just a quick reminder about what systems we have currently in use in Suffolk County in our general use approval, which is our highest approval phase, would be the HydroAction and FujiClean systems. I'm sure most are very well aware of HydroAction and FujiClean. They're very popular here. HydroAction was approved for general use in December of 2021 with a provisional average of 11.1 milligrams per liter total nitrogen. Following provisional, which you get that average based off of 20 systems that are sampled every 60 days for 2 years. You go into general use, and that average in general use continues to move as you go along based off the technology vendor sampling every system once every 3 years. So currently, based on data that has been collected and provided to us, the general use approval as of this moment for HydroAction is 16.9 milligrams per liter total nitrogen, which maintains underneath that 19 milligram per liter standard. FujiClean was approved for general use in February of 2022 with a provisional average of 10.2 milligrams per liter. To date, based on data that's been provided, their general use approval average is 12.7 milligrams per liter. Move on to the next slide. The next phase of approval that we have is our provisional use approval. So we have 4 systems currently in provisional phase: Septitech Star, Norweco Hydrokinetic, Orenco Advantex AX20, and Norweco Singular TNT. The Septitech Star is expected to receive its general use approval in this early to mid 2023. We also expect to be seeing Orenco Advantex AX20 moving in to general use before too long, but they have a little bit longer. All of these technologies, just as a reminder, all meet NSF 245 verification standards, which they've proven in testing that they get 50% reduction in total nitrogen. Our standards much more stringent than that. It's about 70% reduction that we're looking for with 19 milligrams per liter, which is why we have this approval process to see that they can go above and beyond that NSF 245 standard. Next slide. So here we're looking at each of those provisional systems, and as of November of last year, what their cumulative averages were based on their provisional systems that they're sampling. So Septitech came in around 15.6 milligrams per liter, Orenco AX around 17, the Hydrokinetic around 17.5, and the Singular at 22.2. You can see on the previous slide that it was highlighted in a different color. We've been working with the manufacturer, Norweco, to implement a remedial action plan for the Singular. They are working to improve that 22.2, and we will be working on getting a new data set to show what that newly implemented system average looks like. So we will see that coming up later this year. Next slide. So our next set of technologies is the New York State Center for Clean Water Technology at Stony Brook University's nitrogen reducing biofilter. So this is data that we had as of November of 2022 once again. So we have 3 different NRB systems, the unlined NRB, lined NRB, and box NRB. So I'm just going to go through where we're at with each of those. The unlined NRB, we do have the piloting approval requires 8 to 12 systems be installed. We look at the data set from 75% of those 8 systems to get our average that would essentially let them move on to provisional phase of approval. The unlined NRB has been coming in a little bit high on its average. So Stony Brook University Center for Clean Water Technology has requested that we hold that approval to allow them to go to the Massachusetts Alternative Septic System Test Center and do a little testing on some modifications to their configuration that they believe would allow for improved performance. So they will be doing that this year and coming back to us later in the year to present what they've been doing there and see if we can move that in an improved direction. The lined NRB, we expect to be moving into provisional phase next month. So we're going to be working on getting the remainder of their data input and analyzed. You can see here that they have 19.69 milligram per liter. That's a cumulative average as of November of all their systems. But as I said, we only use 75% of the systems to get the approval average. And that's because we know that outliers are always going to exist. It's to get rid of those that have very, very high influent levels, or that might have some kind of homeowner errors that are causing treatment issues. Once we do that type of calculation here and remove those outliers, we would expect that in next year, their approval average will be around 11 milligrams per liter of total nitrogen, and that they will be moving into that provisional phase of approval that allows them to install an unlimited number of those systems. The box NRB up until now has only been having 3 of its systems sampled, and we had a 13.37 milligram per liter average off of that. So great looking average for those 3. 2 additional sites will begin being sampled this month, and an additional 3 samples located at the Shinnecock Nation will be sampled as well coming up this month. So we expect them to, with continued averages like we see, get their approval for provisional use in March of 2024. Move on to the next slide. We're going to look at one of our systems with experimental approval, and that's the AET Tech, the nuclear solution. This is a little bit different than the rest of our system, so we wanted to talk about it because it's the first chemical-based treatment system being evaluated in Suffolk County. The remainder of our systems all use biological processes. So the first full-size system is installed in Suffolk County. And after the first year installed, the system is removing on average about 92% of the nitrogen from that household wastewater. You can see here in this little diagram below that the water comes in. There's a septic tank preceding the system. The water comes in also to an empty tank actually, and then it has 3 chambers filled with a zeolite ion exchange media, which essentially binds up the ammonia, as opposed to converting it to nitrate and then denitrifying from there. So a little bit of a different process. So far it's been working very well, but once again, only 1 system installed thus far. We can move on to the next slide. So here you can see that data broken down a little bit more so you can see what it looks like. So we have in red, all those rows are showing the influent coming into the system. So an average influent around 57 milligrams per liter. And then we take a composite sample over a 24-hour period, as well as a grab sample when we pick that composite sample up to compare. Based on those, you can see that the total nitrogen at the end process is around a final average of around 4.5 milligrams per liter total nitrogen, which is great. I can move on to the next slide. Before we move on to this next topic, just also wanted to point out that there are additional systems for installation. So we talked about a few here that we have some results to show you, but there are also pilot systems and experimental systems in addition to this AET Tech that can be installed here in Suffolk County, and we'd love to see more systems going in. So Amphidrome, Anua has multiple technologies and configurations, Hoot, ANR, Aquapoint BioClear, the EcoPod N series, and Nitrex are all systems that are approved for use in Suffolk County. You can find more information at the reclaimourwater.info site where there's a list of approved technologies. All right, next slide. So the next topic I'm going to talk about is the EHIMS Acela database update that we have been working on over the past year and just recently went live in January. So there are 2 programs that were added to the Acela database. So the Acela database already existed and was being used in Office of Wastewater Management for full permit applications. It is also now going to be utilized for the Septic Haulers Information Portal, or SHIP. We did provide an industry presentation on how that database would be working on February 2nd, and the required use of that system began on February 15th. Additionally, there will be a new IA operation and maintenance program that will be run through the Office of Ecology. There was an industry presentation on February 9th, and required use of that will begin on March 1st. The updates to the Acela program are going to increase efficiency by allowing industry professionals to submit documents directly to health department staff electronically. And Suffolk County's public access portal, the Acela Citizen Access, or ACA, the link is right here for all of that. Database functionality optimizations are continuing to be developed and implemented by staff. So there's always a rough patch kind of when we start the implementation of these things. We want to work with everybody, all the industry, to make sure that within the next month or two, everything's running very smoothly. So thanks for working with us. I'm going to go into a little bit of the changes that this database update means for everyone. Move on to the next slide. So for the septic haulers information portal, this was formerly a different website, which is no longer accessible. So as of February 15th, the Office of Wastewater Management will also no longer be accepting new ship registrations via email as they have been doing. The new ship database through Acela is going to help to facilitate complete and thorough submissions. It's going to look, the database is going to look at submissions coming in and, make sure that they're not providing invalid information. The system is also going to centralize department data into a single database. So it's going to incorporate multiple offices and even departments, DCA, Office of Ecology, Water Resources, to make it so that we can all access each other's information easier, which is ultimately going to make it easier for us to move applications along. For SHIP specifically, there's going to be application integration with the Office of Ecology, which will allow automatic notification regarding SIP grant issuance. Obviously, anybody who deals with SIP grants knows that there's an important piece of the process between the Office of Ecology and Office of Wastewater Management. Ultimately, this system is going to help us to streamline that between the two offices. The new SHIP process is also going to allow for a direct access by the IA design professional. The contractor essentially won't have to act as a middleman, uploading plans. If the IA design professional wants to do that themselves, they would be able to do that by the installer recognizing them on the application. There will also be automatic issuance of the OK to proceed and registration complete reports to all contacts on file for each IA or for each SHIP submission. Can move on to the next page. Just continuing for the SHIP database update. As I said, there's always troubleshooting to be had. So for questions regarding SHIP applications, how to begin one, accessing existing applications, application requirements, statuses, the department is available from 8:30 to 4, 7 days a week. And you can contact by telephone at this number or email ship@suffolkcountyny.gov for answers. For general questions about account setup or use of the site, you can contact Office of Wastewater Management and ask for Ed Hemp. And he's available during weekdays, Monday through Friday, or work hours, Monday through Friday, sorry. Next slide. So the next Acela database update that we've been working on and are moving towards implementation of right now is the IA O&M contract registration submission. So IA O&M contracts and registrations will be submitted by the contracted certified maintenance provider via separate ACA submission to the Office of Ecology. So currently, we get the O&M contracts and the registration forms by applicants over in wastewater, submitting those directly to the wastewater application. Moving forward, instead of that process, they will be submitted by the contractor themselves, who's going to be providing that maintenance servicing to the Office of Ecology. Approval of the documents by the Office of Ecology is going to be required in order to receive final approval for an OWM application or SHIP registration. So that's not changing. Over in wastewater management, they're going to look at the final paperwork and they're going to make sure that Office of Ecology has received an approvable O&M contract and registration. They're just not going to be the ones actually reviewing those documents. Coordination between the two offices for this approval has been automated within the database. So it's not us emailing each other back and forth. Statuses will change automatically once Office of Ecology staff have reviewed. Can move on to the next slide. So as opposed to just handing in those documents to wastewater management, at a certain point in the application process for both full permit and ship applications or ship registrations, an email is going to be received by all contacts on that application or registration following confirmation of the IA installation. So an automated email that you can see here is going to be sent out to everybody who's on that application. And it's going to provide a record ID and a PIN number. So this information should be provided to the contracted O&M provider so they can submit the contract and registration to the Office of Ecology via SELA. Those certified maintenance providers have received a training on this, and we'll be continuing to work with them to get those in via that system. Move on to the next slide. Just want to mention that the Office of Ecology staff will be reviewing O&M contracts and registrations for minimum requirements, including but not limited to a minimum of 3 years of coverage upon installation of all new IAs. So that means not just those that were installed under the SIP program, but every IA must have 3-year contract upon installation. That the IA technology vendor certification of the contracted maintenance provider is valid, the contract start date, the contract term, property owner's contact information, and the property owner's signature. If any minimum requirements are not met, the O&M contract registration will be rejected and must be resubmitted by the maintenance provider. If there's any questions or anyone needs anything regarding this, you can contact us at the email shown here, iaowtsrme@suffolkcountynY.gov, or at the Office of Ecology line at 852-5750. Right. Just another quick update. So many of you may know that we've been working on revamping approvals of traffic bearing IAs recently. Currently, there are 12 IA models that are pre-approved by Suffolk County for use in traffic areas, and additional submissions are under review as we speak. A listing of these pre-approved IA models and configurations will be available on reclaimourwater.info website, and that document is going to be updated regularly as we approve new designs. Just also be advised, I'm sure many of you have already seen this come through, as per guidance memorandum number 40. Although these are pre-approved designs, the design professional may also propose a site-specific traffic rate and installation design. So you are not limited to only using these, but you will have to provide all information to show that a design is structurally sound and meets HS20 loading requirements. Next slide. We have some upcoming training opportunities for anyone who needs some credits for their liquid waste license. We have a couple coming up in March, the Install 100 conventional installation, which is 4 credit hours, and also the IA class. So if you're interested in getting your endorsement 10 to install IAs, or in endorsement 11 to maintain IAs, you would have to take that class. That's coming up in March as well, and is 8 credit hours, a full day class. We'll also be having IA or OWTS 105 in August, and we are expecting that to be in person and with in-field training as well for 8 credit hours. Next slide. So just some training contacts here if anyone needs any information. Suffolk County Septic Industry License, you could contact Matt Sariola with Department of Consumer Affairs. Suffolk County Septic Industry Training Classes, you can contact Julia Priolo. And we also partner with New England Onsite Wastewater Training Center at URI. They have some additional classes that you can take. You can contact Lisa Hollister there at that contact information. Next slide. All right. Any questions before we move on to the next section? Quiet. just the way I like it. All right, I think we're going to be passing over to back to Ken now.
Thanks, Jen. So I think this is our last agenda item for today. And just wanted to give everybody a quick update on pressurized shallow drain fields. These were discussed on our last meeting, I believe back in November. And so just wanted to give you an update on kind of current status and where things are and where things are going. Next slide. So quick recap from the last meeting. The majority by far of the PSDs in Suffolk County are working well. However, we were notified by industry professionals of a limited number of what I'll call apparent system failures. Most of those, over 90% of those systems were installed under the expedited ship approval process. So that in response, the health department consulted with PSD manufacturers, other regulatory officials in proximal jurisdictions, and technical experts. We revised our ship process requirements for PSDs back in June of 2022. And then as part of that meeting, I guess it was the June meeting that we talked about this. Department requested additional industry feedback from the information that we provided back in July of 2022, with the objective ultimately to incorporate any investigation findings and possible industry feedback into our next revision of the Article 6 construction standards. Next slide. So just a quick recap on what the revision to the ship process was, and really the purpose of the revision to the ship process was just to provide a little more oversight from the design professional and the department for ship projects that were proposing PSDs, since they are require a little more design than, say, just a leaching pool. So essentially the plan and sketch that's provided to wastewater management needs to include the percolation test results, unless the native soils were SPSW, but also include the hydraulic loading rate and the calculations associated with the PSD length based on those conditions. And then that design, so to speak, and those calculations needed to be signed by the licensed design professional. All PSDs, even under ship, must be inspected by Office of Wastewater Management prior to backfilling. Under certain circumstances, excavation inspections would be required for PSDs under ship, including best fit scenarios and/or proposals that are proposing to excavate out non-SPSW soils and then backfill with SPSW soils. That's been implemented and going well. Next slide. So some actions taken, initial findings, and other feedback since the last meeting. We haven't seen any more quote unquote apparent failures since the implementation of the revised ship requirements. We've had additional meetings with installation professionals, design professionals, manufacturer representatives, just to pick everybody's brain and brainstorm together. And the industry professionals have been working together with design professionals, directly working with manufacturers on an individual sites on an as-needed basis, which has been great to see. And then some of the additional findings from some of the initial sites that were out there and brought to our attention. Some of those PSDs, coincidentally, were dry. The PSD itself was dry, which was suggesting that the PSD itself might not be being hydraulically overloaded, or that the PSD may not be, may not have failed. Maybe something else going on, whether it's root intrusion or something going on with the IA system. One of the sites that had unsuitable material, it was essentially pure clay installed beneath the PSD. And then one of the things that was observed at a couple of sites that had relatively long runs of piping between the PSD and the IA system was it was possible that the effluent dose from the IA system was just about filling up that pipeline, and that pipeline was sold back to the IA system. So not a lot was being discharged, actually making its way to the PSD. A lot of it was flowing backwards back to the IA system. So that was something that was found at a couple of sites as well. A couple other comments that we received were, consider revising the septic improvement program rules and regulations to allow test holes or percolation test costs to be qualifying expenses. Right now, they're not. So that's something that we're considering right now as part of other possible revisions to the rules and regulations. And then just general, response from everybody, including the health department, we agree, just providing additional training specific to PSDs in Suffolk County. So we're actually working with industry representatives to establish training classes for the design and installation of PSDs. We're considering making another liquid waste endorsement for PSDs. And again, ongoing discussions with manufacturers, the organization, LIASA, Stony Brook University Center for Clean Water Technology, and others to develop and implement some of these new training classes. Next slide. And then, so as part of that previous meeting, we mentioned some possible revisions to residential standards. None of these are being implemented. These are just ideas, right? So other ideas that could be considered are to reduce the hydraulic loading rates under certain conditions, consider requiring the systems to be time dosed versus what's referred to as demand dosed. Just making sure that the PSD base and the final grading cover materials level. Consider requiring a sand bed or base for all PSDs. Consider requiring root barriers under certain conditions. That's something that we've dealt with. Root intrusion is something that we've observed at a couple of sites. Some other jurisdictions use soil classification to establish the design loading rates versus percolation tests. So that's something that we would consider. Consider limiting some of the installation depths, to 12 to 18 inches max versus say 30 inches. And again, these are things that we considered. So during a previous meeting, we had requested feedback. I think I mentioned it before. I think it was back in July 8th. Due to multiple things, the ongoing investigation and the findings that we're finding now, the cyber intrusion, we haven't moved on any proposed revisions to the standards yet. So the door is still open, so to speak, for comments or any suggestions that the industry may have seen since the last meeting in July, or that July meeting, I should say, or June meeting. Next slide. So before I go into wrap up and next steps, does anybody have any questions or comments on explicit to PSDs? I see one question from Jeff. Jeff, I'm going to get to you in 2 seconds. I see a question on the property transfer. I'm going to go into the wrap up and next steps, and then I'm going to jump over to that question. We'll have an open question at the end of this. So I mentioned before, we're hoping for feedback from all of you who are willing to take the time and input. It's always critical feedback for us in terms of shaping this program. So open for feedback by March 9th on anything that you've heard on industry capacity today. And again, the door is still open on our PSD evaluation. So if you have any other recommendations or observations for PSDs, let us know if you can by March 9th. We'll have another stakeholders meeting similar to this one with some additional topics, but also catch up again on the industry capacity, as well as another update on the district and how that's going and stable recurring revenue source. And if there's any interim updates that we can make on that initiative, we will as well. So I'm going to pause a moment and oh yeah, we got one more slide. My apologies. So just a quick refresher regarding the training credits. anybody who's wants to get training credits can just email the septic demo email address shown with the information provided, and we can get you those credits. And then again, this is just a recap of some of the questions going out to the industry. This is just a start to facilitate discussion. If you have any other ideas in terms of industry capacity or thought, let us know, because we really want to hear from you. And I think that's the last slide. And again, this slide deck will go out with these questions as well to everybody. So now I'm going to turn back to some of the questions in the chat here. We still have a little bit of time here. Would the proposed policy for requiring an IA upgrade upon title transfer include the transfer of a title from a homeowner to a trust in a homeowner's name? Good question. And I would say to be determined. Note, there's been no discussion of I'll say the intricacies of what that policy would look like. Some other jurisdictions, I think Rhode Island has a limited program. I think Massachusetts may have a limited program actually for just upgrading conventional systems in certain jurisdictions. So that has not been determined, but needless to say, when that time comes, I am sure there's going to be a lot of discussion on the nuances associated with property transfer, when, how, all these questions. When will GIS, topo, and ownership info be up? Will the link be different? Unfortunately, I do not know the answer to that, Glynis, but we're happy to ask again. I know IT is working as hard as they can and everything. Generally, they haven't been able to give us solid time frames just because there's so many things they're trying to stand up again. But we're happy to look into it and see if we can get any intel on that. But I haven't heard anything recently, and I think I asked them last week. But stay tuned. I'm not sure if the link will be different or not. I know they've been starting to. It's a good sign. Julia mentioned before, they've launched the Reclaim Our Water site as well as a bunch of other sites, which is a really good sign, and those links have stayed the same. So stay tuned. Has there been any, this is from John, has there been any consideration for options for root barriers for PSDs to relieve the 10-foot offset to major root structures? There has not been, but that's something that we can consider. So it's a good comment, and when we start our next round of revisions for the construction standards, we can definitely take that into consideration and in our evaluations. Where will we see the revisions to the PST requirements? Will there be amendments to the standards? And I think the short answer for that one is yes. If there are revised, requirements for PSTs, it would be part of the standards. And whatever we come up with, I would say our goal would be to share a draft with this group before finalizing anything. So that was the goal last time. Then the cyber intrusion hit and other things happened, so we didn't get there. So it would be the same process. We would take the input that we're receiving today and in the past, make some suggested revisions, present them to folks, including the folks in this group, and then receive comments and kind of go from there. But you're correct. I think the standards would be the vehicle for that. Anything else? Any other feedback? Questions? Julie, I think this is the last slide, right?
Yes.
All right, folks. Well, if there's no other questions, really appreciate everybody hanging on here and, sitting down and joining us. And we look forward to receiving any other suggestions or comments by March 9th. And as always, don't hesitate to reach out to us by phone if you have follow-up questions or you want to submit your comments that way. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Next time.